Good afternoon. Welcome to the Pervasive Media Studio lunchtime talk. I should really be able to say that by now. These talks are live every Friday at 1 p.m, both here in the building and live online. So whether you're in Bristol or far away, you can join in the conversation. My name is Martin O'Leary. I'm the studio community lead here. I'm a white man in my late 30s, long hair and a beard, wearing a red woolly jumper. Good afternoon. Welcome to the Pervasive Media Studio lunchtime talk. All right. These talks are live every Friday at 1 p.m. in our space by hot desking alongside our residents and staff from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. So especially big welcome to those of you who are new to the studio, and this may be the first time. Can I see show of hands who's new? Nobody's new today. Okay. Well, I'm just going to do the spiel anyway, because maybe some of you don't remember it. What is the Pervasive Media Studio? We're a diverse and collaborative community exploring creativity and technology, everything from comedy to coding, product development to performance art. And we're a partnership between Watershed, where we are right now, the University of the West of England, and the University of Bristol, and we're funded by Arts Council England. So what we do is we offer studio space, desks, meeting rooms, events and opportunities, all for free to our residents as part of a spirit of generosity and mutual exchange. And we're a space for people to take risks with embryonic ideas and make time for collaboration. So housekeeping, hopefully you all know this already, but please do feel free to move around. Kitchen's over there, grab a cup of tea, glass of water, whatever you like. Please don't use the microwave, it interferes with the induction loop in here. We have a quiet space just through here to my left. If you need to take a break at any point, just hop on through. Fire exits, we are not planning a fire drill, so if you hear an alarm, that's real. They're at that end of the studio. The studio team will direct you in the event that anything goes horribly wrong. And there are accessible toilets, and I don't see any babies, but there is also baby change in the corridor just over there next to the kitchen. There will be a Q&A at the end of this talk. If you're watching online, please pop your questions into the YouTube chat. If you're in the building, stick up your hand, we'll give you a mic, and we'll do it the old-fashioned way. You can get news on all of our future talks by heading to watershed.co.uk/studio, or at PM Studio UK on Twitter, or at Pervasive Media Studio at mastodon.social on Mastodon, or at Pervasive Media Studio on Instagram. So our speaker for today is Josh Kopeček, the founder of Echoes, a community platform for geolocated sound walks. He's going to be talking about the possibilities, boundaries, and the future of interactive performance, and how sound walks and interactive performance technology can combat social disconnection by helping us to explore the relationship between ourselves and the world. Unfortunately, because of the RMT train strikes, Josh has not been able to make it to the studio today, but he's joining us remotely for what I hope is going to be a great talk. So please join me, and you're going to have to clap quite loud because you're not mic'd up. But please give a warm welcome to Josh.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for the introduction. It's great to, well, not be here in presence, but be in Pervasive Media Studio, at least virtually. So I'd like to talk a little bit about the history of Echoes and my work with locative audio, and then talk a little bit more about some projects we've worked on in the past and some we haven't. Some of which have used our platform and some which haven't as well. So about 10 years ago, or just a bit longer than 10 years ago, I started getting interested in locative audio as a medium. I was introduced to it after I finished my PhD, unluckily, because I was quite interested in it's quite an interesting topic, and I wish I could have actually done my PhD on it now, by my old professor from the University of Manchester, who had set up what was called the Locative Audio Project. And at the time, that was a kind of cutting edge, I guess-ish project which brought together people doing sound walks across the world, and also live performance from those sound walks. So we did synchronized, geo-synchronized, time-synchronized walks in different cities around the world. And I was actually living in Vietnam at the time, so they asked me to do a sound walk in Hanoi. So I constructed an audio walk there. And we did it, and it was live streamed to a performance venue in Valencia, and then people were performing around the live streamed audio and video as well. And I really like the concept of this idea, and I decided that it would be interesting for us to develop a platform around this for creating sound walks. And at that time, I didn't really envisage the possibilities of, or I guess the breadth of opportunities that were available with sound walks at the time. And we were using some very basic software where you could simply upload a sound file and attach it to a geolocated point on a map. But it was kind of very clunky software. So this is what led us to be able to want to create our own platform from it. And we were successful with some funding to do a few arts projects, collaborating with various artists in Vietnam and then in Denmark. And people started asking us to be able to use the platform themselves, to be able to publish their own sound walks. So we opened the platform up to other people being able to use it, which I guess was a bit of a kind of sluice gate to the world, and more people started getting interested in this our platform and what it could do and how they could upload their own content. And this led me to also, right from the beginning, we started to work with specific artists to create bespoke content around our platform. And right from the beginning with this Danish project, which we worked on, people were asking for specific types of sound walks or specific types of functionality around sound walks. So I was really interested in developing this technology further. And for me, it was the concept of located audio as a medium is something really interesting, because it goes beyond I guess concert hall performance or just listening on a pair of headphones. Is really linking space or place with this the art, the sound as a medium. So it becomes a medium in its own right, because it's not quite a concert piece, and it's also not quite a solo listening experience. And the best sound walks which I've come across in the past are those which really link to the location in which they are, which really take advantage of those that connection as a medium, and connect with the spirit of the place. So after a while, I mean, maybe I could come back to I'll talk about a few projects which we've done in the past, and then I'll come back to the kind of future possibilities and more of what the talk, I guess, what I was aiming the talk to be about. So we'd worked on, like I mentioned, quite a number of bespoke projects in the past. One of which, we worked with an artist called Billy Mark, who's in the States, in I think South Carolina, and he has done a number of different audio walks across the world, which take advantage of ambisonics, so spatial audio content. And he's particularly interested in creating walks which are thought-provoking, provocative pieces, and often subversive as well. And as an artist, he's a performance artist, but quite frequently uses audio for these pieces. And he decided to use our platform to create these audio walks using ambisonics. So if you don't know what ambisonics are, there are, in fact, does anybody know what ambisonics are in the audience? Put your hand up if you do. 0 people. Okay, so it's like 360 video, essentially. The idea is that it's a sound sphere which you can listen to in situ, and you can, as your head moves around in that space, the sound moves with you. And it's often what film directors have used in the past to capture audio, like 360 audio scenes in a place while they're recording video. And it was developed as a format in the 1970s. So it's been around a really long time, 50 years. But it's been slowly developed, and I guess you can call it an open source audio encoding platform, audio encoder. And it enables you to have this complete immersive sound bubble around you. which you've been able to do for a long time, and you can do either on headphones or 100 speaker setup anywhere in the world. And often these concert venues take advantage of this because you can just record in ambisonics and then play it back on any kind of headphone or speaker setup. So it's a really nice tool to be able to use because it goes beyond what you can do with stereo sound. So Billy Mark was really interested in using this as a tool to put people into a more I guess ritualistic, what's the word? I guess more immersed in the place. And he did this walk that he did, which was in California around the Googleplex, so the site where Google is. And he placed these individual musical pieces, which were, I guess, more, they were evoking a sense of ritual and performance. And he asked people to go to each of these points and sacrifice their bodies to God. So this idea of being on the Google campus, and this idea of asking you the question of who is God, what is God, and why you're there, and this provocative question of asking you to sacrifice yourself in these places. So it's really interesting use of locative audio technology. And that was done, I think, a couple of years ago. And then I'll talk about another project. We worked with another group in the States called Swim Pony. They're a theatre company, but they often do transmedial pieces. They've worked with games and theatre performances, performance art. And for this project, they wanted to do an audio piece, an audio storytelling app. So they had commissioned 10 authors based in or around Pennsylvania to create these audio walks, which were then placed on these nature trails within Pennsylvania. So each of the authors came up with different, very interesting narratives to be placed along these trails. And some of them did kind of more murder mystery or clues solving game-like experiences, and some of them did more some of them did more kind of thriller pieces as well, and they were all, I think, about 45 minutes to an hour long pieces. So you would walk along these nature trails, and as you walked along them, you would become the character in the trail, and they were really evoking the spirit of the place. So these story trails were actually taking place where you were. So they were describing things which were happening around you, and they would also comment on the time of day or the weather. So to put you more into this kind of immersive, liminal state within that environment. And I was really taken by this idea that you could commission an author to work with a specific place or space like that. And so they did these 10 trails, which were all commissioned by the Pennsylvania Environmental Council. And they worked with the authors to craft these trails and specifically work with them around the craft of working with located audio as a medium. So for me, that was a really interesting point, which is that as a discipline itself, you need to reimagine how sound is used in a specific place. And they had a composer who worked on those individual narratives as well, who knew the capabilities of the platform, because they also used diegetic and non-diegetic sound or music as well within the trails, which had particular parameters which enabled you the music to continue if you were sat in a specific place, and the story would then not continue until you moved to the next place. So that the whole structure of the piece was dynamic and could last as long as you did the trail. And depending on what you did, different things happened. Like if you went off the trail, it would warn you that you were going off the trail and things like this. But you could also unlock different parts of the trail based on how quickly you were moving or how slowly you were moving. And they also work, like I mentioned, that we had weather cues as well. So it would comment, like when you started the trail, it would make a comment about what the weather was like on that particular day. And we have built these kind of functionality into the platform to be able to create these audio which reacted to the time of day or the weather as well, which is a really interesting extension to what we were doing. So for me, that was a really interesting take on locative audio, because it's creating immersion through physical movement, and pushing people into a different listening state. And I guess the only real way to experience that is to go and do it yourself, to go and listen to these kind of audio trails. Right, I'll talk about the so another big project we did was the Ellen Reid Soundwalk project, which was premiered in a few years ago. It was during lockdown, I think 2021. So Ellen approached us to do an orchestral piece, or what was essentially proposed to be an orchestral piece within Central Park, and she commissioned the New York Phil to do the music for it. So she worked very closely with them to produce individual musical stems, which she composed for the park. Now, Central Park is absolutely massive. I think it's bigger than Hyde Park, and she covered the entire park with sound. So it's a locative audio piece. So as you walk around, music triggers as you get to specific places. But she had covered the entire space, and she'd also layered the music as well, so that as you move through the space, these layers interact with one another in different ways. And she was experimenting with creating these changing musical layers, musical soundscapes throughout the park, which also reacted to the elements within the park. So it was a reactive musical soundscape, and that one was incredibly popular. And in fact, one person said that they had decided to do the sound walk every morning when they walked to work across Central Park. So it's it's a kind of different kind of listening modus from other types of it's less throwaway. You're investing more in the listening experience because you might get something different from it each time, depending on which way you walked across the park, and which direction you walked, how quickly you walked, all these things. So placing these and constructing these narratives or these musical soundscapes and breaking them up, you're actually deconstructing the sound and asking the listener to reconstruct them for you. So that for me also was a really interesting point within locative audio, which is that you're asking the listener to do the construction of the soundscape. You're asking them to construct the performance themselves. So it becomes more game-like in its in how it plays out. You don't necessarily know what the piece is going to be until you start listening to it. So depending on where you start or where you go, it can be completely different. And I'll talk about one final piece which I wasn't involved in, but which I thought was really interesting, which is Joe Scott's Wonders in the Wild City or Wonders in the Wild Smart City. She did two pieces around this, which was and this work was a winner for the one of the runners up or whatever it was for the Walk Listen Create Awards, Soundwalk September last year. But I thought it was a really interesting, provocative piece. So what she it's essentially an academic exercise, but she took it as artistic intervention into examining how the cityscape has become wild in different from two different standpoints. One is her obsession with untamed wildness within the city. So finding spaces where there is nature which is out of control, which is nobody, or spaces which nobody takes control of, which are just left to grow. I mean, you might see like there's a cordoned off, fenced off area where buddleia grows or something like this, and these spaces are these are the wild spaces in the city, ones which nobody controls, nobody takes ownership of. And she also pitch that against the smart city, or these unseen data flows. So there's been a lot of work around developing smart cities and getting data flows to work with each other in larger cities in Europe. And she was specifically interested in the data flows in Manchester around this, because it has been posited as a smart city. And she was particularly interested in, for example, when you cross the road at an intersection, you are being monitored as to, how many people are crossing the road, when you press the button on the lights, when the cars stop, how many cars are stopping, what the traffic flows are like. All these data flows are being monitored in real time. And where is this data? And who has access to it? Because in a sense, you are being surveilled in the city, and you become this kind of anonymous number within a system. But this is completely invisible to you. So this smart city is creating this invisible network of data flows. So she was interested in both this as a sense of being wild, the wildness within the cities, and also the natural wildness as well, these untamed spaces in the cities. And so the sound walk that she did was, she was trying to, I guess, vocalize or sonify these invisible data flows, and encouraging you to go to these spaces where these things might be, but also encouraging you to think about these and what might be unseen within these spaces. And as an academic exercise, very interesting, and also as an artistic exercise, I found it really interesting as well. Let me see, I've got her. I'll read you her research questions because where are they? Yeah, here. So she had three kind of broader research questions. So what forms of creative practice with a mobile device reveal and activate qualities of wildness in urban environments, as evident in non-human ecological material and digital processes? So that one research question is really interesting, because she chose to use sound walks from that. And then her research questions, which were around the actual locative audio walks, were what capacities of geolocated sound walk practices can be mobilized to reveal and highlight qualities of wildness in urban environments. So this is her outcome, was actually realizing these questions. And how can geolocated sound walk practices be used to draw attention to these non-human and often less visible processes in city spaces? And the third one was, how does engaging with these geolocated sound walk practices affect how participants experience familiar and unfamiliar urban spaces? So it's interesting, coming to causing people to look at the cityscape in a different way, with different eyes, to visualize these, or to kind of sonify these invisible processes and flows within the city. And this really catches my attention as well, because it's a provocation. And like Billy Mark's work as well, it's a provocation through sound to ask questions about our environment and the things which are happening around us. And because when we're listening to a sound walk, we're in a particularly immersed state. We have our headphones on and we are concentrated on listening to this experience, but our eyes are free. We are present within the space. We have a particular kind of attention within that locative audio medium. So you can use that, and these artworks specifically use that in different ways to cause people to think about what the space is around them and how they are interacting with those through these narratives. And I think that's, for me, is really the crux of the artistic aims of these pieces. And that's really also what should be the kind of highest goal of located sound art, is when you get people into this kind of liminal state, and then when you're able to take them to the next level in terms of thinking about their interaction with the world and with the sound which they're listening to. And I think that's a really interesting point. And some other people are also starting to work in this realm as well. So yeah, what I also would like to see is more people working in this realm as well, because I think locative audio is a great medium for this, and something which people, I always say this to people who come to us and will ask questions about locative audio. It uniquely captures our attention, because often we are walking when we are doing these experiences, and walking art is something where we have a different type of attention from when we're sitting down and listening to something in a concert space. We're also often in a solo setting, or we might be with a small group of people, but our attention is really incredibly well focused on these audio experiences. So as a medium, you've got a different type of attention from the concert space and and just, if you were to just listen to a podcast, because that the sound you are listening to is uniquely linked to the place in which you're in. Okay, how much time have I got? I'll talk very quickly about another project which I'm doing in Germany, I'm working on a garden project, which is actually an interactive musical garden. So this is, we originally thought about doing it as a locative audio piece, but it is in a sense a locative audio piece, but it's not using headphones. So it's a physical garden space which we have placed various sensors into. So we have you imagine a kind of large park type space with trees around the edge, and we have placed various sensors within the garden. So on benches, on stepping stones, we have a big trampoline in the center of it, and these ultrasonic sensors on various plants and trees. So as you walk around the garden, you trigger sounds, and these sounds create a musical soundscape within the space, played by real speakers. So if you're walking as a group, each individual person will be conjuring different sounds, and those sounds will appear within the garden, specifically where you are. And the sounds and the music changes according to the time of day and what kind of weather it is in the garden, how hot it is, or whether it's cloudy, or whether it's raining or not, how many people are in the garden, and we've got various other types of parameters which control the sound within the garden. So when we feed all these parameters in, we get this changing soundscape within the garden. So again, I really like this idea of rewarding people who come back to an experience by having a different experience the next time they come. So maybe the first time it's sunny and they hear a particular soundscape, and then the next time they come and it's raining and they've got something completely different, and it might be a different time of day as well, so they'd have a completely different selection of sounds. So that's what I'm specifically working on at the moment, and that project has really got me thinking about the processes of locative audio and where we can take not just locative audio but performative interactive pieces as well. And we've been working, Echoes, my platform, we've been working a lot with spatial audio. So I talked about the ambisonics, which we did with Billy Mark earlier. We've also been working with positional audio. So you can have virtual sound objects within the real environment, which you can walk up to and listen to. And these have recently been enabled by the Apple AirPod headphones, which allow you to track which direction the listener's head is pointing in, which obviously you've been able to do with VR and AR glasses and things like this for years, but they've only just recently started putting them in headphones. So you can do audio-only AR experiences with GPS, which means you can turn the cityscape into an audio AR playground. You can have sounds which you can interact with within the cityscape. And then place ambisonics on that, and you can create these fully immersive sound scenes within a given space. So there's lots of possibilities with that, and there actually aren't very many people working with that at the moment. And Android, Google have just announced that the Android now has support for this as well. So you can do these experiences both on iOS and on Android now. And we're just developing support for the Android devices now, which is very exciting, because we can have cross-platform support for these amazing audio experiences, and anybody on our platform can start authoring these audio experiences as well. because the platform's open and anybody can sign up and start creating spatial audio experiences. We've also had support. I mean, I talked a little bit about the trail-off narrative experiences. We have support for conditional playback as well, so you can control when sounds are played, and this enables you to have this a more reactive soundscape, whereby if you're traveling in one direction, you would get one set of audio, and if you're traveling in the other direction, you would get a different set of audio, or maybe even a third time if you go back in the other direction, you control it. So, and also these bifurcated experiences. So you could have a narrative experience which started in one place, and then you could be asked to go left or right at a junction. And then depending on which way you went, you would get a different audio experience. But those audio experiences could overlap with each other, and you can create a very dynamic experience with very simple tools. So actually, you're still using all these very simple things like GPS triggering a sound in a specific place, but when you combine it with the conditional playback and spatial audio, you've got this incredible sound world by putting these very simple things together. And when I'm helping people put together audio walks, often I say, it really is often better to keep things incredibly simple. You don't need, you can create an incredible sound experience with very simple elements within it, just stereo audio or just mono audio. So yeah, you don't necessarily need all these things, but these things can take it to another level. And recently we've also started thinking about the Internet of Things, so IoT objects as well, so taking it beyond just the mobile device enabling an audio experience, but also using that mobile device to interact with real world objects around you. So we're going to be adding support this year for specific IoT objects. So you could create something which was, for example, a digital billboard or a sign or something like this. So when the listener walks up to it, it could display a message depending on when they walk up to it, or different messages at different times of day and things like this. And also we could use those objects to interact with a listener. So say, for example, you have a physical button in a space. You imagine a big red button at the front of the talk space here. And you could go up and press that, and then that would play something on your headphones. So you can do a lot of stuff with these IoT objects, both in terms of like physical objects which interact with your listening, and then your movement or your presence in a space interacting with those objects around you. And that really takes the kind of locative audio into this liminal realm of like where does the experience, like the personal experience, stop, and where does it and where does my listening stop? Because you could, for example, have a physical speaker within a space which played audio, and then you would be playing with this interesting idea of when is it personal listening and when is it group listening, and how do different people interact with it, and what do different numbers of people do in that space. So so we're going to be adding support for some of these things into the platform and working on some really interesting projects in the coming years with these elements. And I'm really, I think this is extending it beyond the realm of just audio and into these interesting, building it into a more theatrical space and dynamic, responsive space is the future for locative audio. I think I've got to the end of my notes, and I covered all the projects I wanted to talk about. And I wanted to, ask if anybody was interested in locative audio as a medium for using it for their work, or if they want to ask any questions in general about echoes or any of the projects which I've mentioned. Does anybody have any questions?
All right, thank you, Josh. So we got loads of time for questions, I think. I can see quite a few already. I'm going to go to Jack first.
Hi, Josh. Thanks for that. That was really interesting talk. Yeah, found that really evocative. I have a question for you about like the future of this medium and what you think the sort of potential of it is. So I've been involved in sort of location-based games, and I've done some locative audio stuff for quite a while. And in 2016, when Pokemon Go came out, that was the sort of moment when location-based games as a medium sort of became a sort of popular phenomenon. And I'm wondering like what you think it would take for locative audio to reach that same level of sort of mainstream, popularity, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, it's tricky, isn't it? Because Pokemon Go was, I guess you can kind of see it as a flash in the pan. It really didn't last very long. It massively peaked and then just, I guess the peak lasted about a year or so, and then it kind of, yeah, like me, ran out of steam. I think in terms of like locative audio, it's never going to reach that mass appeal. It's always been a niche thing, but I've seen from when we started working with locative audio, when it was just a handful of people really doing it, and very specific projects. I've really wanted to open up our platform as a tool for people to create these experiences and simplify that creation experience. One of my original aims was really to make it incredibly simple for people to put these things together. So all they do is draw a shape on a map and attach a sound to it. That's the basics. And you can publish a walk just by doing that. And often people did, they would just draw one shape on a map and upload a sound file, and that was their audio walk, which is fine. But then I would say, well, why don't you think about it as a more, think about this as a more reactive space. So if you put two sound files on the map, then you've got a different audio experience depending on which way you went, which way you walked through it. And that starts to, as soon as you think about it that way and you start thinking about this deconstruction, you're thinking about how you produce the audio work in a different, you're thinking about it as a medium more. And I've seen more and more people come to us, and more students, especially groups of students, universities using this. And it's just general increase over the years. I think when we started, we had like Echoes as a platform. We had like, I don't know, 20 users or something like this. And, we had like 10 people doing the audio walks when somebody staged an event. And now we have between 200 and 500 people a day doing audio walks worldwide. So it's massively grown. And the Ellen Reid Central Park walk, I think they did a big publicity push around their walks when it was first premiered, and they got like 150, 300 people a day doing their audio walks in Central Park, pretty consistently across the breadth of the campaign. But then they left it up, and it's just generally got a steady stream of people doing it every day. So I think it's slowly starting to invade people's consciousness as a medium, and people are starting to understand it now. When I started with this, people didn't really like, what's GPS? What is that? Is that like the data on the phone or something? And now people understand what location is on devices. There are no problems with any of these iOS devices or Android devices. Everything generally just works these days. So the technology's almost been removed from the picture. And I think that I would like to see, I don't ever really want to see a kind of Pokemon Go peak for this, because I just want to see that general increase in interest and awareness of locative audio. And, that's been really pleasing that it's also, we had a peak during the pandemic because people were wanting to go out, outside and use their time to do these locative audio walks. But it's weathered that as well. So we just had a general interest over the years, which has slowly grown. And there've been more and more platforms. I think vaguely, there've been one or two new platforms doing locative audio each year since I started, and some of them have come and gone. But generally, the scene has just widened and widened. And like I was saying, with the things like the spatial audio support on Android and iOS, and generally people, always have headphones with them these days as well. There is growing interest in this as well. So and the technology is slowly becoming available. So it's a very gentle thing rather than a kind of spike in interest. Does that answer your question? I mean, I guess it doesn't really answer like what the future would be of it or what I would predict would be next. I mean, to be honest, in terms of my future, I'm seeing immediately, like in terms of like this year or this quarter, it's going to be the spatial audio stuff where people will suddenly latch onto it because Google have just announced, I think it was last month or the month before, that the Pixel Buds, their kind of flagship headphones, they now have head tracking support in them. So that now matches the Apple headphones. So that's 100%, basically 100% of people with smartphones could potentially now do these head tracked audio experiences. So that for me is the current focus. And then the next focus is going to be the IoT stuff. So now the IoT realm has kind of peaked and become mature. Nobody gives a shit whether they can program their toaster or not. But I think like using IoT to create interactive performances is a really interesting tool. Being able to put those interactive objects out there in the space and cause them to be able to react to you and you to be able to react to them and then to control the experience you're having is really, really exciting. So yeah, that's the kind of future for it.
Thank you.
Hello, thanks. I've actually got loads of questions, but I'll try and minimize it. I'm interested in this from like a storytelling perspective. So I'm like a writer and narrative designer, and really interested in the storytelling potential of IoT. And yeah, it's really cool. I wanted to ask a really easy question around what software you use to pinpoint the sounds in a space. And for the Ellen Reed, did you have to like make a 3D model of the park, and is that how you did it, or was there another method?
Okay, so in terms of that's a technical question. It's interesting. You said you were going to ask a storytelling question. I was like, oh, interesting.
No, I just said, sorry, I meant I'm a storyteller, and that's why I'm interested. But I just want to know how it works.
Yeah, sure. So we have a web platform for authoring the experiences, and all you do is literally go on the web platform, and you have a map, and on the map you zoom into where you want the sound to go, and you pinpoint it on the map, and then you draw a shape, and that shape you can either draw a circle or a polygon, and you would then attach a sound to that zone, and then you can basically publish the walk, and then when the person walks into that shape, it triggers that sound. It's as simple as that.
Okay, cool. And
There's no 3D modeling or anything like that.
Okay, like how big can the shapes be, or how? No, actually, what's the smallest they can be?
We had one walk where somebody created zones which were the size of a continent, which was quite an interesting one. It was a kind of subversive one, but they will go down to. It depends on the capability of the devices, the modern ones, and it also depends on the environment. But generally down to about 2 to 5 meters.
Okay.
We've had people do them 2 meters, but not really been able to trigger them. And it really depends on the space in which they're in, because, for example, in an urban environment, you might not be able to get close enough, like get the GPS close enough to a wall, say. And it also depends on whether they have Wi-Fi and Bluetooth and their data connection enabled as well. Because, of course, with GPS, you need line of sight to the sky to be able to see literally see the satellites, and the cloud cover affects that as well. But then in a city environment, that can be taken over by where the cell towers are. So you can have triangulation using cell towers. And also Wi-Fi. So if you're in a building and you're on the Wi-Fi, or even just have your phone on, just have the Wi-Fi on and your phone not even connected to it, it will know you are in or very close to that building. So there's a lot of intelligent work within devices going on to pinpoint where you are. But GPS nowadays is very quick. Like if you just walk outdoors, it will get a fix within a few seconds. And generally that fix will become more accurate the longer you stay in that place. So yeah, it really depends on the device and the space, but yeah, about 2 to 5 meters. I mean, GNSS, which is the latest European one, say they will go down to 1 meter, So you should get accuracy of 1 meter with GNSS. The military GNSS goes down to 1 centimeter, but obviously the public don't have access to that. But the technology will go down to 1 centimeter. So, which is bonkers. That's insane,
Yeah.
isn't it?
Thank you. Cool.
Looking forward to some military soundwalks.
Hi, Josh. Thanks for an interesting talk. I've been working with locative sound for about 17 years, and I'm interested because I've been trying to build a series of sound walks around Bristol with echoes. And, you know, it's been a bit of a struggle because the documentation isn't very prevalent. So you're kind of sucking and seeing. I wondered if you could actually put some video tutorials online for people to expand the use of echoes, because I think that is essential if you want creatives to really take it up. I'm impressed by what you have actually added to the platform, so congratulations on that, and also by making it so open to the public. But it's just a plea to document it better so that it's not a trial to build with it. But thank you.
Yeah, you're very welcome. Yeah.
Hi, thanks for that. That was fascinating. I'm sort of very new to. I'd never heard of soundwalks before this talk, but I'm sort of fascinated by the potential. And I was wondering, have they been used at all in a sort of mental health capacity? So for like well-being walks, that sort of thing. And if so, is there some research into that already, like the benefits of that? I was just wondering. I'm a psychology student, so that's what I'm sort of interested in. But yeah.
Yeah, that's a really interesting one. The Ellen Reid Soundwalk recently did one in London. You know, she's done iterations of the Ellen Reid Soundwalk all across the world. The most recent one was in Tokyo, but she did one in London last year, and that was sponsored by the Wellcome Collection. So they, do you know the Wellcome Collection? It's a kind of it's a health charity essentially, but they especially champion well-being and mental health. And we pitched it to them, or Ellen pitched it to them as a way to improve well-being, mindfulness, and I think as a tool, it's really interesting. And there have been various projects which have touched on this. I'm trying to remember. There's one called Take 10 Minutes, which is a similar one, which is a meditation experience in parks, and they were thinking of using our platform. And yeah, and the Ellen Reid one as well. I'll need to think. I can't remember off the top of my head if there are any other projects. But I can put my email in the or I can share my email with you at the end of this, and then I can send you some links if I remember some more things. But yes, as a tool, it's definitely linked to mental health and well-being because it's getting you active. And in fact, some of the more recent projects I've talked about have been trying to connect to the NHS's 5 points of mental well-being. You know, the Clang 5, connecting and being active and being mindful and giving to other people. Yeah, so there's definitely a strong connection between those kind of listening experiences and being active and being mindful and listening to other people. So yeah, there's a strong connection there and definitely scope for more of that in the future.
Yeah, great, thank you.
Hiya. Is there any scope within the technology to change like music through your location? For example, like if I wanted to have more treble, say I'm getting older, my treble stuff is going. If I was to move like closer to a certain point, could I have more treble? Or maybe if I went anti-clockwise around a point, could I have like more sax, less clarinet? Is there any way of like using that in the technology?
So we haven't done dynamic audio generation or FX control, which is, I guess, what you're talking about. But there's definitely scope for that in future. I've been looking at, I did previously look at ways of integrating algorithmic composition into sound walks. So, using Max MSP or PD to integrate those kind of more reactive elements into a sound walk. But currently, we don't have any of those things in the platform at the moment. But it'd be interesting to look at that in future. But generally, people, they want to layer sounds, and you can do a lot of that just by placing different types of EQ'd sounds on top of one another. But obviously, it isn't a dynamic reactive thing.
Okay, cool. I have one other question. I had an idea at the weekend about, when you see people having silent discos, is it possible to have a combination of like a silent disco in the bass only and have a treble in reality? Can you like blend the soundscape that's in reality and the one in your earphones?
So the difficulty with that is synchronization, because you like having a real world sound and a virtual sound on the headphones is, then they're never going to be synchronized. That's one of the things which museums are really interested in, is trying to how you can have streamed audio from like a video which is in front of you, like a display video, and then get it to your mobile device. But it's virtually impossible to get the synchronization to a level where it's acceptable to your ears. So that's another really tricky one. Yeah.
I've got a question from Rolgardina. I don't know if I've pronounced that correctly, but they're watching online. And they ask, they were using sonic maps before and are keen about finding more about echoes, but you mentioned there are other platforms that can access similar tools. Could you tell us some of those, please?
Yeah, so there are plenty of other platforms out there for creating audio walks. There's one called Gesso, which does relatively similar stuff to ours. I haven't really heard very much about it recently, but yeah. And then there's Sonic Maps as well, which was actually the original influence for Echoes, but which was dormant for like 8 years or something, and then they started up again recently. And then there are plenty of platforms for creating more kind of tourism-focused audio tours. So there's Voice Map and Guide2Go, and there used to be Detour, but that's defunct now. Yeah, those are the kind of main ones which I've seen recently, which are still functioning. So yeah, go and check those out. And I'm sure the problem is also the nomenclature, because often, if you say locative audio, or is it the same thing as a sound walk? Often in Europe they tend to call them audio walks, and walking audio. There's no real fixed name for these things, so it can be difficult to define. But have a Google of all those different terms and see what you can come up with, and tell me if there are any new ones.
Hiya, I'm really interested in sort of media archaeology and the history of some of these concepts. And I was wondering if there were many interesting examples of people sort of exploring the idea of locative audio before GPS or spatialized audio existed.
So you mean, sorry, examples of projects which, like
sort of
older projects?
Influence, I mean, sort of mid-19th century or pre-GPS, people exploring this that sort of inspired you in your work, or?
Yeah, so I think, there are a few. I mean, Cage was one of the really early pioneers of sound walks. With his, he called them sound walks as well. So, but he would take students out into the forest and get them to listen to their natural environment. He was a massive proponent of, being aware of the sound which is around you. And that has a kind of lineage which does end up in the kind of modern sound walk as well. If you track it through kind of Hildegard Westerkamp and other people, Janet Cardiff and all those other people who've worked in this realm as well. Because I didn't talk about any of that kind of early history of it at all. But you can go back, I mean, as early as kind of Sarti. There's some kind of discussion of whether, like, because Sarti talks a lot about walking and composing, that he would go for walks and compose within the parks, and he would only be able to compose his music while walking. So that's like, in a sense, like walking music. So he's using the natural sounds in the environment to really influence like how he was composing. Yeah, that's the kind of earliest example I can think of that is really walking music or walking sound. Yeah.
Sorry, one more thing, just reacting to that. Is there sort of ideas about location-based composition then that you've been thinking of, or that other people are exploring at the minute in relation to the circuit?
Composition as in like musical composition.
Yeah, so tools for location-based composition.
Yeah, so recently we worked on, in fact, there was one thing that I didn't mention that we worked recently on time tempo synchronized audio. So we can now have loops which are tempo synced. So you can have numbers of layers within a piece which are geographically distinct but perhaps overlapped with each other. And depending on which one you walk into, it will then trigger that sound and loop it. And when you walk into the next layer, it will wait and then synchronize it with the other layer. So you can create a essentially beat synced composition, tempo synced composition in a space. And you can have multiple tempos playing over one another and like non-tempo sync material as well. So you can create some really interesting dynamic musical soundscapes as well. And there was a group we worked with in the Netherlands, Strebos and Van Rijswijk, who have done a load of different compositions along these lines of having like tempo synced composition along with sound combined with sound art to create these incredible park pieces. They're amazing work.
Hey, it's me again. So yeah, I had a question regarding the software that you were using again. And I just wondered, so is it programmable in the sense that, you know, when you end up in the forest, you hear a different type of music if you've already been to the cafe in the park versus the, I don't know, gate in the park, for example? Could you kind of make those branch choices and those consequences from your previous journey?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So based on where you've been, or in fact, it's based on which zones you've triggered. You can then conditionally set pieces of audio to play. So if you go to a specific point, you can then control what sound plays in that space based on where you've been before, which zones you've triggered, and also stop sounds from playing based on where you've gone as well. So you can create this, either like negative or positive effect on which sounds are going to play at a specific point, which opens up this kind of interesting theatrical aspect to it. It's quite cool.
Time for one more.
Hey, I'm quite interested in the sort of collaborative element of it, and the sort of technology I can imagine is sort of driven by just advancements in that sort of particular area. But in terms of working with writers and directors and composers, how have you found that in terms of spinning a sort of a coherent narrative, and who's sort of, who are the people leading that narrative? I'm sort of asking it in a way because I've been on some sound walks and things like that where sometimes it feels like technology is sort of driving it and the narrative is a bit lagging behind.
Yeah, this is why I specifically talked about the projects that I did today, because they were really great examples where the narrative and the content has really pushed what was possible rather than the technology. They're interesting uses of the technology, but they're great examples of good production, good content production, good narrative writing as well. And that is really the aim of, or what I see as the aim of this. It should be that the content is leading this and not the technology. I have talked a lot about the technology, but when I work with people and closely on the production cycle, I often spend a lot of time and pains explaining exactly what you can do with locative audio, because you have to think of it as a medium and not just as you're writing a podcast or doing a concert sound piece. You know, you have to go back to basics and say, okay, I've got to kind of deconstruct what I'm doing. I've got to think about my composition in a different way. I think spent a long time with Ellen Reed explaining all these possibilities and like explaining like, okay, well, you need to break it up into stems, but not just stems. You know, you can think about this, you can break it up into the smallest pieces, and then it will reconstruct itself into an interesting piece from that. And the art is in making those pieces put themselves back together in an interesting way for the listener. And that could be narrative audio or music or sound art, it doesn't matter.
Thank you.
All right, I think that's probably all we've got time for, so please give a hand to Josh.
Thank you so much.
If any of you do want to stick around in Hot Desk today or find out more about what we do, then please come find one of the studio team. Studio team, give us a wave. And if you're watching online, you can drop us a line on studio@watershed.co.uk with any questions. Thank you all for being here today. Thank you, Josh, for pushing through the technical issues. And we'll see you all again same time next week.